If I could go back, not far back, just a few years, and sit down with the version of me that was just starting to build this business, there's a list of things I would tell him. Not motivational things, not mindset things, practical things, specific things about money that nobody sat me down and explained, and that I had to learn the expensive way. And when I say expensive, I mean that in both directions. Money I lost because I didn't understand something, and money I left on the table because I was too uncomfortable to have certain conversations or make certain decisions. Because here's the truth about finances when you're starting a business, especially when you're doing it alongside a job, alongside a young family, alongside a life that already has a lot of moving parts. Nobody really teaches you this stuff, not properly. You get general advice: save money, keep records, don't spend what you don't have. But the specific things, the things that actually catch you out, those you mostly learn by walking into them. So this is me trying to shorten that path for you. The things I genuinely wish someone had told me before I needed to know them. The first thing, and I want to spend some real time on this because I think it's the most misunderstood thing in early business, is the difference between revenue and profit. And I know you know they're different things. I knew they were different things too. But knowing they are different and truly understanding what that means for how you run your business, those are two completely separate levels of understanding. When the business started generating money, real money more than I expected, I felt successful. And in some ways I was, but I was measuring that success entirely by what was coming in. Revenue, the top line, the number that sounds impressive. What I wasn't looking at clearly enough was what was happening after that money arrived, what was going out, what it was costing to actually generate that revenue, what was left after everything was accounted for. I had months where I felt like the business was thriving. And when I actually sat down and looked at the numbers properly, the profit margin was much thinner than the revenue figure had led me to believe. There was one quarter specifically. My oldest was about 1 at the time. My wife and I were in that phase where you're tired all the time and just trying to keep everything moving, where I told her the business had a really strong few months. And it had. Revenue was up. Things were moving. But what I hadn't fully processed was that our costs had gone up at the same time. New tools, a contractor we brought in, some marketing spend, and the net result, the actual profit, was almost identical to the quarter before. We had done more work, spent more money, generated more revenue, and kept the same amount. That was a sobering moment because I realized I had been measuring the wrong number. I had been celebrating the wrong thing. Revenue tells you how busy you are. Profit tells you whether the business is actually working. From that point, I started looking at profit first. Not revenue, profit. What is left after everything is accounted for? That is the real number. That is the one that matters. This one is connected to the last point, but it goes deeper. When you start out, when you're building something from nothing, when you're trying to get clients, when you're trying to prove the thing can work, you give your time away, freely, generously, sometimes recklessly. Discovery calls that go on too long. Work you do speculatively, hoping it will turn into something. Endless back and forth on quotes that never convert. Favors for people who promise it will turn into something. And I understand why we do it. You're building, you're learning, you're trying to create momentum. But what nobody told me is that time has a cost. Your time, specifically, has a very real financial cost, even when no money is changing hands. I worked out at one point what my hourly rate needed to be for the business to make financial sense alongside everything else I had going on. And then I looked at what I was actually doing with my hours, including the unpaid ones, the exploratory ones, the favor ones. The gap between what my time was worth and what I was actually generating per hour was uncomfortable to look at. Because when you're a father trying to build something in the margins of an already full life, the time you give the business is not free. It comes from somewhere, it comes from sleep, it comes from evenings, it comes from weekends, it comes from being present with your family. That time has a cost, whether money changes hands or not. Once I understood that, really understood it, I became much more deliberate about what I gave my time to. A speculative project that might lead somewhere became a much less attractive option when I could clearly see what it was actually costing me. Not every hour you spend on the business needs to generate immediate revenue, but you should know what each hour costs and make a conscious decision about whether that's the right investment. Because the alternative is just giving it away without realizing you're doing it. I want to talk about something that I think a lot of people feel, but very few people say. I was uncomfortable talking about money. Specifically, I was uncomfortable asking for it, naming prices, negotiating, and following up on late payments. And that discomfort cost me real money. Asking for what something was worth felt arrogant. Pushing back on a price felt confrontational. Following up on an invoice that was 2 weeks overdue felt awkward. So I'd underprice to avoid the conversation about price. I'd accept a lower offer to avoid the negotiation. I'd wait longer than I should have on late payments because I didn't want to make things awkward with the client. There was a client, I won't go into the details, but there was a client who owed me money for a significant amount of time. And every week I'd think about chasing it and talk myself out of it. Too pushy, don't want to damage the relationship, they'll pay when they can. Meanwhile, I had my own commitments, a mortgage, a family, things that didn't wait because I was feeling awkward. And here's what I eventually understood. A client who consistently pays late or who you feel uncomfortable chasing is not a client who respects your business. And a business that can't have direct conversations about money is a business that will always be financially fragile. Money conversations are not confrontational. They are professional. They are normal. They are how business works. I had to genuinely retrain myself on this, practice it, get comfortable with silence after I said a number, stop filling the gap with justification and apology. I said the price. I let it sit. I stopped explaining why I cost what I cost as if I needed permission to charge it. And something interesting happened. The clients who pushed back hard on price, the ones I would have caved to before, mostly weren't the clients I wanted anyway. And the clients who were right for the business didn't make me feel like I needed to justify myself. Your price is not a question. Say it like it isn't one. This one I think about a lot, especially now that I have 2 children and everything that comes with that. In the early stages of the business, I was reinvesting almost everything, which is not wrong. Growth requires investment. I understand that. But I was reinvesting without building any kind of buffer, any kind of cushion, any reserve that existed purely to absorb an unexpected hit. And the thing about life, especially life with a young family and a side business and a job and all of it, is that unexpected hits happen regularly. A piece of equipment needs replacing. A client doesn't renew, and there's a gap in revenue. An unexpected expense shows up at home. Something goes wrong with the project, and you have to invest time into fixing it that you hadn't budgeted for. Without a buffer, every one of those things becomes a crisis, or it becomes a choice between the business and the family. I had a period where a few things went wrong in the same month. Nothing catastrophic individually, but collectively, and with no reserve to absorb it. It was genuinely stressful. The kind of stress that doesn't stay in the business. The kind that sits at the dinner table with you. That wakes you up at night. My wife noticed before I said anything. She always does. And that conversation about money, about the business, about the pressure I've been carrying quietly was one of the more important ones we've had. After that, I made a decision. Before anything else happens with money that comes into the business, before reinvestment, before tools, before anything, a percentage goes into a reserve account, untouchable except for genuine emergencies. It's not a huge amount, it's not dramatic, but it is the difference between an unexpected cost being a problem you solve and an unexpected cost being a crisis you survive. Build the buffer early, before you think you need it, because when you need it, it's too late to build it. This last one is the most personal, and I think it's the one that goes deepest. We all carry something about money from before we had a business, from how we grew up, from what money meant in our house, from the messages, spoken and unspoken, about what it means to have it, to want it, to talk about it. And those things follow you into your business, whether you're aware of them or not. I grew up in a household where money was tight at times, and the lesson I absorbed without anyone ever saying it directly was that wanting more money was somehow a bit much, a bit greedy, that you worked hard, you were grateful for what you had, and you didn't make too much noise about wanting more. And that story, that completely unconscious story, was sitting underneath every pricing decision I made. Every time I felt awkward asking to be paid. Every time I undercharged because something felt like too much. It took me a long time to realize that building a financially healthy business was not greedy. It was responsible. It was how I would be able to provide properly for my family long term. It was how I could build something that actually lasted. The way you think about money personally will become the way your business handles money, unless you actively look at it and decide to do something different. I'm not telling you to become someone obsessed with money. That's not what this is. I'm telling you to look at the stories you carry about it, because some of them are probably costing you more than you realize. So if I sat down with the version of me that was just starting, coffee on the table, no business yet, just the idea and the excitement, here's what I'd say. Learn the difference between revenue and profit before anything else. Revenue is not the number that matters. Know what your time is worth and stop giving it away as if it costs you nothing. Get comfortable talking about money. Name your price. Wait. Stop apologizing for what you charge. Build your buffer before you need it. Life will find a way to test whether it exists. And look honestly at the stories you carry about money, because they will run the business quietly in the background until you decide to run it yourself. None of this is complicated, but complicated and uncomfortable are different things. And most of this is uncomfortable, which is exactly why most people avoid it until they can't anymore. I avoided some of it longer than I should have. I'm telling you what it cost me, so maybe you don't have to find out the same way. If any of this landed, if there's one thing here that you recognize in your own situation, drop it in the comments. Tell me which one. I genuinely want to know. And if this is your first time here, this is what this channel is. Real conversations, real experience, no highlight reel. Subscribe, because there's a lot more of this coming. See you in the next one. Check the links in the description below. Hit that subscribe button if this was helpful. And honestly, go reclaim your time. I will see you in the next video.